welcome to another episode of The Cougar, the Bitch, and the Wardrobe. I'm your host, Lana Mazer, also known as Curated by the Cougar. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. And if you are already a listener, welcome back. Today, we're going to be discussing finding your voice, the freedom beyond male reaction. So let's get into it a little bit. It's something that I've thought about quite a bit, especially over the time that I've been really putting myself out there more and more on social media, and especially with the growth of the podcast. And I guess what preempted this topic and this discussion today is the idea behind sharing personal information, which clearly is now floating out there, and about the fact that I have children and that my ex husband, the father of my children, lives in the town that I live in. And I've been very, very careful in terms of information that I've been sharing, very clearly not to disparage my ex husband. And by no means is that anywhere on my mind as something that I would want to do. I don't have any types of vindictive feelings towards him in that way. But I've been really careful, which I guess is a good thing, and I want to continue to be respectful of his privacy. But of course, at the same time, it's really important that here I am touting the idea of authenticity, speaking our truth, sharing our stories, helping each other, helping one another with experiences that have occurred, and trying to move forward, working through situations. And I really think that what has helped me significantly over my lifetime, and especially in the last few years, is hearing stories from other women that have gone through similar things. And sharing those stories also makes you feel less alone and really connects you to another human being and understanding their path. So I wanted to start off by saying that and get into some of the things that really occurred for me with my ex and brought me to this, to this point in my life where I do want to share more from an authentic standpoint. I do also think that the idea or the question, how does centering male reactions limit women's expression? And this occurred for me very real in a very real way very recently. So I went on a date on Tuesday night and it went great. And the conversation really flowed and we were making each other laugh. And as far as a Tuesday night and getting to know someone, it was really fun and I really enjoyed myself. But it was funny at the same time when I started to think about the way things were being expressed, and that sometimes I had to, in maybe initially, think that I had to edit what I was saying because of the idea of making myself smaller in terms of the anticipation of the male reaction. And at this stage in my life, at 48, I'll be 49 in May, and with dating, I'm just like, this is who I am. This is where I'm going. This is who I want to be. And I love that about myself. And so I don't want to edit myself. I have found my voice. And so that is my freedom. So, going back to the conversation, it was really interesting because I had said flat out to this man that one of my concerns with, and I didn't know where this was going to go. This was a first date, but, I didn't want to waste his time and I don't want to waste my time. So, I said flat out that I had a concern regarding the fact that he was not yet divorced and still cohabitating with his soon to be ex wife. And really, the only part in all of this that was, well, I don't want to say the only part, but the main part that was really sort of disconcerting to me is that at this point with dating, I would like to meet someone where this could be a significant relationship. And for a man or for a woman, because I remember feeling this way too when I first got out of my divorce, is that I was ready to sow my oats, so to speak. And so I said to him, I'm like, look, you're not even divorced yet. And I can understand, what that feels like and what that could potentially look like for you. Are you looking to sow your oats? Because if you are, that's cool for you, but that's not really what I'm looking for. Now, the response that he gave me was that no, he's not looking to do that, that he finds that intimacy with someone that he doesn't have a connection with is unsatisfying. So, okay, that was an answer. And I was willing to take it and sort of say, okay, well, we'll see where this could potentially go. I thought it was funny though, because then he said to me, which, it's fine. He could say, obviously, speak to me what his concern was. And he said to me that his concern was that I would have limited free time to spend with him. Now I found myself in that moment ready to go on, like, to defend myself, like on the defensive, like, what are you talking about? And wanting to really express and sort of say, well, I have all this free time and this and that and whatever. And I was like, whoa, slow down. I really, again, it was that male reaction where I felt before I even was given the opportunity, he was already rejecting me, which was so untrue. But again, that's how, and again, I don't like to make sweeping statements, but in reality, societally speaking, women, we have been trained to really diminish our feelings, our concerns, or even express when something doesn't seem right and something doesn't really express who we are, what we're trying to say. And so I took a pause, and then my response to him was, well, you know, I I don't really know how much free time you're looking to spend with someone, but I have plenty of free time as far as I'm concerned. Free time for me to explore parts of my life, things that I'm interested in doing, because every other weekend my kids are with my ex-husband. And so for me, that's a lot of free time. And I said, but look, I understand if for you, if you're looking for something more than that. And then it just came out of my mouth. And I said, look, like I'm really looking for fuck yes energy. And I guess I said that in the sense that, and he said, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, like I don't really want to well, no, I didn't say that, but I said, you know, as a woman and you're, I'm a busy woman, you're a busy man, like, we all have limited time. We have a certain amount of free time, and isn't it nice to, when you have that free time, to either spend it with a significant other, or going to the gym, or riding your bike, or I like to go to museums or go to theater, to be able to have the opportunity to do all of these different things, and also differentiate how you spend that time. And in that moment, I realized that as a woman, I feel like we can't win when we're talking about how time is spent, or free time, or spending time together. Because I was almost shocked that he was like, it's not enough time. When meanwhile, I've heard from, you know, men or, you know, in previous relationships that too much time is, whoa, I need space. And now all of a sudden, like an entire weekend of free time that can be spent together is not enough. And also, in that moment, I was thinking to myself, so what is he looking for? If he needs someone who has more free time to spend, well, then that would be someone who maybe doesn't have a career, doesn't have friends, certainly doesn't have kids, doesn't have any hobbies, doesn't have any commitments. And so, what are we then left with? So, I just thought that that was interesting. And again, I was so ready to sort of diminish and not respond in the way that I wanted to because of that concern with the male reaction. The other thing too that occurred on this date is that I was talking about the fact that I had been married twice. And his response to that is, "Oh, I knew you were a man eater." And I'm like, "What the fuck does that mean?" You know? And again, when I think about being quiet or diminishing my voice or not responding because of concern of how I was being viewed or the male reaction, I would have been like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I would have tried to argue against this idea or this thought that this person was having about me. But truthfully, okay, if that's what you want to think, I mean, that's not who I am at all. And quite honestly, there's a lot more depth to me and to my experiences with being married and divorced that's saying that it's a result of being a man eater. I don't even know how to argue that, nor do I really want to spend the time, the energy, or the breath in arguing that. So it was a very interesting experience for me, comparatively speaking, from how I would have responded years ago versus now. So, what are the implications based on male centering, on waiting for male approval? Well, the implications I have found is that, then you're living a life where you feel diminished, you're made to feel smaller, you aren't living your authentic, you are not being your authentic self. You're literally it's almost like you're auditioning for a role that you are dying to get, and you may or may not get it. You may audition and maybe you'll get the part and it will feel great in the beginning, but then eventually you will realize that you're lying to yourself. So I think that when I look back on my experiences with dating, with marriage, um, I made those mistakes or missteps in my youth. And one of the biggest things for me that I realized, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, is that I was very, very nervous when I was dating to express my experiences that I had with my mother, and that my mother did suffer from mental illness and how that had affected me as a child. And I was very afraid to talk about that because I didn't want that male perception of me to be that, oh, she's going to be just like her mother, or, oh my God, like, do I have to worry about who she is or where she comes from, or is she going to turn into her mother, and all of these things. And so I was very, very nervous about sharing those realities of my life. And so I really diminished that and kept that very quiet, and that was hard for me because now, I mean, granted, this is many years out, and now my mother has been gone for a number of years. But even if my mother were still here, it's still, the genetics is still there. The connection to my mother is still there. But now I've sort of been able to say, you know what, it is a part of me, but it's a part of me that I had to survive, that I had to build a lot of strength, and has made me a better person for it. So I do think that now, when I think about male centering and its implications, that's something that I would be very forthcoming with. The other thing, too, that I find in terms of male centering is that I think that when we're dating, and as a woman, especially maybe now in our 40s and beyond, is that maybe we have had experienced and continue to experience a certain amount of success and or financial stability. And in a lot of ways, I think, well, that's great, because we're taught from a very young age that men don't like gold diggers. So you don't want to be a gold digger and you should be financially independent, which I agree with. I think financial independence is power and it gives you a lot of options. So maybe we're financially independent, but then that's also bad, because finding that freedom with male reaction is that I either think, if we're too needy and having that sort of I want to be rescued, I'm a princess kind of thing, well, then we're gold diggers. Or if we're financially independent and successful, then that hurts the male ego. Now, I'm not saying that this is for all men, but I'm just saying that that has been somewhat of my experience. And again, this is more about finding our voice and the freedom beyond male reaction. And so the point of what I'm talking about today is more to encourage those of you out there, my listeners out there, to express your realities without the concern of what the response is. Because the truth of the matter is, there are so many wonderful, mature, emotionally intelligent men out there that would be very excited to meet an independent woman. It's just that maybe I find that they're, far and few between. But they are out there. And again, my point here is not to disparage men, but more to encourage my female listeners to express their truths and not be shy about it or feel less inclined to do so. So now, going back to my experience with marriage and my divorce, and specifically my marriage and divorce from my second husband, whom we share two children with. So when I really got into creating my brand and the podcast, the largest part of all of this for me is, again, to be expressive and to be authentic and to really be honest and truthful, because I think that's so important. And as I started out by saying in the beginning of this episode, is really creating that community amongst my female listeners and male listeners as well, and is to be able to share those stories. And a number of people have said to me, well, aren't you afraid that your ex-husband will find out what you're saying or listen to what you're saying, and watch your videos and whatever? And I gave that some thought, and the truth is no. So to begin with, I did block my ex-husband on my social media platforms right in the beginning when we were starting our divorce proceedings. And it wasn't from a place of spite, but it was to create boundaries. I was starting a new life for myself and really wanted privacy. And it wasn't just him, but I also blocked his family, because his parents, his sisters, their kids, who are now, I mean, in their 20s, again, not from a place of spite, but really to create boundaries. I really wanted I wanted privacy, and I wanted the space to create this new life for myself that I wasn't exactly sure what it was going to look like. Now that it's a few years out, those parameters are still in place. And I continue to believe that that's important because the truth of the matter is, he doesn't need to see what I'm doing on a Wednesday or Thursday night. It's not that important. And the other way around, I don't need to see what's going on with him. And truth is, I don't really care. And I doubt he cares what I'm doing on a Wednesday or Thursday night. And the more that I thought about it, is that being blocked from my social media, I can't necessarily block him or his family members from what I'm doing with my podcast. Now, he is very, very aware of my podcast. He knows what it's called. And he has even expressed to me that he thinks it's really cool that I'm trying to help other women. But the kicker here is that he is not interested in hearing my podcast. And the thing is that I don't think that he's interested because he doesn't want to hear what I'm saying. As much as he thinks he understands what I'm talking about, I don't think he really does. And again, it's not to be spiteful or mean. And I'm just saying this from a place of explanation and understanding that he prefers to be in spaces that will directly praise him. And he will and has always shown an avoidance of self reflection or growth. So anything that might sort of point in that direction is automatically going to be a no go for him. So his emphasis on uh, seeking ego boosts and in rather than engaging in deeper emotional spiritual growth, he's not interested in that. And to add on to that, I'm sure that his family members and friends also are aware of the existence of my podcast. And I know that they haven't listened to it either, because if they had or did, I would have heard about it. So the point is that I no longer want to diminish or hide from the things that I want to express, because I do think that it's so important. If I am going to build this authentic platform, I do want to speak of a place of these have been my experiences. Now, I do not think that I completely was this innocent bystander in the deterioration of my marriage. I participated in that. And I am sure that there are many things that he would want to say that I had my hand in. And quite honestly, I would really be open to that conversation. But he never wanted to have that with me. So that's another large part of it, is that, to be honest, I know why I wanted to get divorced, but to this day, I mean, I think I know why. When I said I wanted a divorce and he agreed, I don't really know why. So I would be open to that conversation. But again, it was a conversation that was never had. And at this point, the detachment is already there. We're already divorced, and so be it. But again, this is another reason why I feel that it is a safe space for me to express those things. In addition to that, I will always make sure that my boys do not have access or are not listening to my podcast. I mean, they are not on social media, and I monitor what they're doing and listening to on their iPads. And they're not on Spotify. But it is, as they get older, a conversation that I will continue to have with them. However, I, of course, I want them to have a loving, supportive relationship with their father. I think that is so important. As they get older and more mature, and if those questions, do arise, which I have pushed off, when they do ask me things about why we got divorced, and it's not appropriate to be having those conversations with them now. But I do encourage parents that really want to shelter their children from the realities, maybe of why relationships fall apart. I mean, maybe you don't want to air the dirty laundry altogether, but I think of a certain age, I do think it's okay to have conversations with children, when they're more adult, because there are things that I did and I don't want them to go into relationships with the same um, thoughts, and maybe I can help them make better decisions for themselves. But at the end of the day, there is only so much that we can do to protect our kids. And so I think at some point, without even saying anything as they get older, they do understand the realities of their parents' relationship. And quite honestly, too, that was why I felt that I wanted to get divorced, because I didn't want my children to grow up thinking that this is what a marriage should look like. And not that I was so depressed and crying or whatever, but I am a very different person today in a more positive way than I was when I was married to their dad. So I do think that in some respects, as they get older and they can handle some of that information, I do think that if the questions arise, choosing the right words as to not disparage the other parent altogether is okay. The cost of my silence and eventually finding the freedom beyond male reaction is that I definitely paid a price. And I definitely paid a price during my marriage to protect my ex-husband's ego and image. And when I reflect on the feelings of making myself smaller, and that definitely hindered my growth and my identity. And going into that a little bit is that I, when I met my ex husband, he had had a successful, very successful career on Wall Street. And when that fell apart 2 weeks before we got married, the hedge fund that he had worked for had dissolved. And what occurred over the next 10 years was a lot of his ego getting in the way of him finding another career. And I believe that because he had had so much success as a young man, a very young man, that it really did him a disservice, because I had been raised by a very successful father, but it took my father many, many years to get to that point. And it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And so I had always equated success with super, super hard work, a lot of sacrifice, time, energy, and giving up things that you wanted to do with your free time, but just couldn't. And with my ex, it was not like that. I'm not trying to say he didn't work hard, but it was very different. It was Wall Street was in its heyday, and he was in the right place at the right time. And he sort of, you know, lucked out, so to speak. And when that fell apart, he really felt that it was beneath him. He didn't want to do this and he didn't want to do that. And that wasn't paying enough money. And he didn't want to commute. And he didn't want to work for that person and he didn't want to go there. And this was too many hours and this was too far away. And it was none of that sacrifice to be like, well, I got a family that I need to support. And what occurred over the next 10 years was a lot of nothing for him in his career. And I really wanted to cover that up for him, in the sense of that, we lived this beautiful life, and I was trying to be very protective of his ego, Now, I was in many ways able to do that for him because of the life that I had been provided with by my own father. And again, it took me many, many years for me to admittedly say that out loud because I felt somewhat, I guess, ashamed that I lived this privileged existence that had nothing to do with me or my hard work and had everything to do with my father's sacrifice and his hard work. And I also didn't want to be viewed a certain way. I didn't want to be viewed as like spoiled or like, I hate that terminology, like rich bitch or whatever, like all the shit and terminology that exists out there. And quite honestly, my father worked really, really hard and did a lot of financial planning to provide a life for me and for my sister. And for years, I never talked about it, and mostly because nobody's it's really nobody's business, like your financial situation. But I do think in the context of being fully transparent and honest, this is why I feel the need to share this information. And so I hid all of this and never discussed it with anybody. And we continued in this way where my ex wasn't working, but, people assumed that we lived in this beautiful apartment in the city and then this amazing house in Montclair because of Dave's hard work and financial planning. And I think that it took that situation, which I was already uncomfortable with, and made me feel a lot of shame about it because it was like I was hiding this part of me that I felt I really couldn't share. One, because it would expose my ex-husband, and two is that I was scared of like how people would view me, that again, that this was this beautiful and privileged existence that I had and it had nothing to do with me. And then fast forward to we got divorced, and thankfully, I had a prenup, and I stayed in this house that I live in Montclair because I bought it. And it's a funny thing now because when I got divorced, the number of people that said to me, "That's so nice that Dave let you keep the house." Fuck that. It's not nice. It's my house. And I realized that, again, I was responsible for creating that narrative, that I myself was hiding behind that narrative. And even today, when I meet men to date, this guy that I went out with the other night, same thing. He was like trying to understand, like, oh, so like your husband let you stay in the house, your ex-husband let you stay in the house, and like he's living in an apartment. Now, at that point, I guess like I really don't want to be like, listen, motherfucker, like I bought the house. I mean, I thought that might have been like too aggressive. But and again, maybe too much information to share so early on. But again, like I just want to come clean, and not come clean, but like live in my truth. And quite honestly, if I meet a man who maybe this is too much for them, or they feel a certain way and it hurts their ego, or it makes them feel badly about themselves, and maybe, it makes them feel less successful or whatever, then they are not the man for me because I can't diminish myself or lie to myself about who I am. And now, quite honestly, I live in a space where I am so grateful every day. I am so grateful to my father. And I know that he is so proud of my sister. She is a successful businesswoman. He is proud of my successes, of the boards that I serve on, the business that I'm trying to build. And he has always said to me, Lana, you don't need to apologize for anything. This was something that he feels proud of. So for me to feel badly about that, well, then that's hurtful to him. And that diminishes my father's hard work and sacrifice. So here I am today trying, I should say, not trying, but living in my truth and getting better at it every day. I want to, in conclusion, emphasize the importance of authenticity for myself and for my listeners and the community that I am building. It really will only help us foster a supportive environment for each other, for other women seeking similar truths. I think that I have found so much liberation in the honesty that I've been able to recognize for myself. And I want to encourage others to do the same. And I continue to detach myself not only from male reactions, but from reactions in general. And that has enabled me to be a more clear and more impactful storyteller or truth teller. I believe that we have to continue to empower ourselves and build community and challenge the status quo, if not only for ourselves and our community and age cohort, but for our children. I really would love to encourage my listeners that if you want to continue the discussion, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to DM me on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube at Curated by the Cougar. You can find the podcast on Spotify as well as on Apple Podcasts, and you can also message me there, and I promise to answer. But it is really helpful for me to get feedback from my listeners, and please let me know if anything resonated with you or maybe something didn't and you want to have a conversation about it, or maybe something that I left out today, or a personal story. I would love to hear from you. And also, it really, really helps the podcast grow if you share an episode with a loved one or a friend. Maybe it's something we spoke about today and you want to share that episode with someone, or maybe it's one of the past episodes. But either way, it really helps to grow the podcast and build community. Until next time.